Irashaimase. Hello and welcome to Fitaurus Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fitaurus. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this Saturday we have Devader, an awesome new twin-stick shooter on Steam. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Falcon Brew, who was also generous enough to provide me with this copy of the game, we have Devader, a new twin-stick shooter with some light tower defense elements. So it's one that I can say right off the bat, I recommend this one, especially if you're a fan of twin-stick shooters. So I'll include a link to the Steam page in the description below. Feel free to go and check it out. So diving into the main menu, the game itself has a lot of great options under the settings. You can go and tweak a lot of the elements of the game itself. Although some options are strangely enough missing. There's not really one for controlling the resolution, and I also wish there was the ability to go and rescale, or rather reposition, the HUD elements. But setting those aside, I feel like the game does do really good with its settings. Diving into the new game, you do also have the ability to continue from a previous game if you still have continues, or if you just happen to have exited out at an earlier point. Anyway, once you begin a new game, you have the ability to change your player color as well as select your difficulty. The difficulty scales from easy to deity, and normal is the one that we'll be looking at today because normal has some extra mechanics that easy does not, and it's not as insanely hard as hard or deity. So the game does support up to 5 players. You can play with 4 gamepads and the keyboard and mouse. So today we'll be looking at it as a 2-player co-op run. And the multiplayer is done in a drop-in kind of environment. So if you have the controllers set up, you can just have anybody pop in whenever they like. So real quick, between the stages and when you begin the game, you have these little cutscenes that kind of give a story of what's going on. So we're this Devader robot that is trying to protect, or that are rather is responding to a distress signal, and we're trying to protect this matrix of hexagonal monoliths. Basically, this is the last remnants of a society that was attacked by these creatures, the Kryn as they're called. And well, we've answered their distress call and have come to their rescue to go and save the last vestiges of their society. So the game itself is a basic twin-stick shoot 'em up, where you have your movement on the left stick and your targeting on the right stick. You can set it to fire with the right stick as well, but under the normal control scheme, you have a separate fire button, and that does come into play later on. So after each stage, you do have those little cutscenes that kind of tell you the story, like I was mentioning. We have our results screen, a lot of great multipliers to build up there. And then here's one of the parts that I really love about this game. So there's a really in-depth upgrade system where between levels you can upgrade certain elements of your mech. And the first one here is really important, as on normal and above difficulty it will unlock a skill. So each one of these upgrades gives us a different skill. So like if we were to increase if we were to increase firepower first, then it would give us a supply drop. But the one that as I've played around with them, the one I like the best is this one here, the one that you get for upgrading the armor first, the battle drone, which just protects this designated area. So since I mentioned this one has some tower defense elements, you really want to be able to go and protect certain areas surrounding that matrix of crystals. So we'll grab this one first, so we have the battle drone. And then in this kind of an upgrade system, I think upgrading your firepower, you can never really go wrong with having more firepower. Then after that, there are several upgrades that we can get to the Devader, which will pop up between levels, and we have 2 choices each time. So this one is for the nuke. We can either have a missile, which we can use to target for more remote areas from where our Devader is at. It's definitely more like tactical, but it's a little harder to use. Or we can use the pulse, which will go and send out this nuclear explosion from around the Devader. And it's the easier, more straightforward one to use. So between or rather when we begin the next stage, it'll guide us through a quick little tutorial teaching us those new mechanics. It is possible to turn this off, but for our purposes today, I think it definitely works to go and show how things work. So here we go and just get a brief description of how to use the battle drone and the pulse, and then we're required to use the pulse. So we have to walk up to these targets and BAM! Nuke. So one thing to go and note in co-op mode is those nukes are shared between players. So if one player sets off the nuke, then you have to wait for the cooldown before you can use the nuke again. And I'll also go and throw down our battle drone. So this side of the matrix doesn't have any kind of turrets or defensive structure. So if I go and place down the battle drone right here, then that battle drone will kind of watch this side firing at enemies that come. It's possible for either of us to reposition it, and that's in that little reticule there, wherever that happens to be at. If I go and press my left trigger, then it will go and move to that point. So we have these enemies that are a whole bunch of like hanging balloons, so they're kind of a little bit weird, but they fire all these bullets. They're kind of tough to go and take out. So if we want to make short work of the enemies on this stage, it's best to go and use our nuke. So, but these enemies actually really great for going and showing off one mechanic. So if you go and take damage, one way you can possibly regenerate your armor is by grazing the bullets. If you'll notice with the green mech, as the bullets get near, there's these little lightning bolts that come out from the mech or the shot. I'm not sure what direction the lightning bolt's going, but there's that connection between them. And you're basically draining those shots, grazing them, both for score and also to regenerate your health. That's not a mechanic that's ever mentioned in the tutorial, so that's just something that's useful to note. I accidentally repositioned the turret without meaning to. Let's get him back where we want him. Throughout the course of the game, we'll also get several other upgrades that we'll have to choose between two different types. The next upgrade that we'll get, which we probably will see before this video is done, is the turret. So there are a couple different turrets we can choose between. There's also an enhanced cannon, which charges up by not firing. And then lastly, we have also, well, no, actually there are a couple other ones. There's like a type of energy ball that we can ultimately get in the end, and also drones, kind of like the small little drones that you saw in the very first level of the game. So the game is wave based. We have all these enemies that coming in waves, and as you can go and see in the top middle of the screen, we're currently on wave 4. There are over 100 different types of waves that we can potentially encounter throughout the course of play, including different types of bosses. So there's a lot of variety to what you could potentially go and see, though most of the time the waves you see are pretty similar. I have to be careful here. I've actually taken quite a bit of damage, and I did indeed die. So when you're playing multiplayer, the one-ups are shared between your different Devaders, so that is something to keep in mind. Let's get in there and nuke these guys. So occasionally on the battlefield, we'll get power-ups that will spawn, like this one all the way over here. Oh, like it's already gone. That are basically ammo power-ups. We can also get power-ups that will replenish our armor, or we can also get power-ups that will give us additional turrets or regenerate our shields. So the ammo ones will have certain icons above them, and I do kind of wish there was guide somewhere that would give us an idea of what like all the different upgrades did. You can kind of like tell from just A, picking them up, and B, kind of that little icon that goes and sits above them, but most of the time it's like nice to just have a little guide to actually like know what all those are. So the first boss that we encountered was this crowd control, where we have to defeat all those like fidget spinner enemies. Once they're taken care of, that's it for the mission. More story here. We call them the Kryn. They are relentless. They pursue our very existence. We're still here. We need your help. So back to the upgrade screen, we'll be able to pick up additional upgrades. I think we'll keep on going the same path. More firepower and more armor. And then here we get to pick up the turret as I was mentioning. There's the Warden, which you can go and place down at a distance and also recall quicker. Or there's the tankier, like almost literally as it kind of looks like a tank. The Blinker, which you have to be able to stand next to pick up. So once again, we get a quick little tutorial how to use the turrets. We go and place it down here. Bam. Then we pick it up, place it down here, and there's also this power up to go and pick up another turret, and we can have a couple around. We don't want that turret there because we actually kind of have that side already covered, so we'll place it over here for just a bit more firepower. So the game itself does have multiple endings as well. So if you were to go and play and complete the game on easy, you would get the default ending, but if you're playing on normal or above, you have the potential for getting up to 19 different endings. One of the ways that you can get some of the endings is by fully upgrading certain abilities, either like your firepower or some of the ones for the turrets, which we'll go and see now that we have the turrets. Next time we're at the upgrade screen, there'll actually be additional options that way. So that's one way you can go and get endings, and with there being 19, that means there's also some hidden ones as well. So there's a lot of chance for replayability. Different bosses, potential for different waves. This is definitely a game that will keep you busy for a while. So you might have noticed that we're on the same stage going and protecting the same matrix throughout the entire course of our gameplay. One thing that the game you might have noticed on the stage is the stage is an adaptive environment. Things that are happening, the enemies going and blowing up, or in the case of some enemies, they'll go and even scorch the ground, or our nukes will go and leave marks on the stage that will permanently stay there, kind of giving it its own feel every single time. That's great, but one of the things I would have liked to have seen is maybe just a little bit more variety to the gameplay, like maybe different parts of the planet or different planets kind of protecting each different matrix each time. But it does kind of provide a sense of continuity that we're going and protecting the same core matrix the entire time. Hana Hana, give us a hand. So this one's kind of an interesting enemy wave. We've got these creeping hands that we shoot, and as the hands move, they leave these trails in the ground. Once again, that adaptive environment. So that's basically what we have here in Devader. Just a great twin stick shoot 'em up with some interesting tower defense mechanics as we're trying to defend this core of hexagonal matrices, or this matrix. So as far as the minus flavors are concerned, so as I noted, I just wish there was a little more variety to the stage itself, especially as the stages do get a little bit, can get a little bit on the long side. It would just be nice to have some more variety to the stages there. And then there's the lack of ability to resize or reposition the HUD. So on the screen that I go and play on, there's a little bit of overscan, so I'm losing some of the edges of the screen. So like the resources that are displayed in the bottom left there, those are partially cut off for me. So I just wish I'd be able to go and pull everything a little bit further into the screen itself so that I didn't lose all that extra information. But there are a lot of awesome plus flavors here. I love the way that the upgrade system is for this game. The ability to go and choose all those different upgrades for the mech. as well as being able to go and power up all those different parts of our mech as well. It's just really... Ooh, wow. This guy's really getting in there and destroying those matrix. It's just super satisfying to be able to upgrade all those elements of our gameplay. Also, the boss fights. There are all these different boss fights, and they're really fun to go and see which bosses go and come up. I think a lot of it is based off of which skills you happen to go and have. But they're satisfying. There's different elements to the boss fights. And then lastly, my big plus flavor is the game has a really arcadey feel. So if you like those arcadey shoot 'em ups, then this is one that's worth trying. So for this upgrade, we'll go and increase the defense on our turrets, as well as, once again, firepower. And here we have the ability to upgrade a chest cannon. So we can go and pick from the Sonic, which is a really powerful shot, or we can go with the Pulsar, which will go, and once it hits an enemy, it goes and bursts into multiple shots. We'll go with the Pulsar, just so we can go and show how that works. You charge that up simply by not firing for a moment. Bam! We can go and fire our chest cannon. So there's an audio cue as well as a visual cue when that's charged up. So there we have it. Devader served up for your enjoyment. As I said, especially if you're a fan of shoot 'em ups, then this is one that's, or of twin stick shoot 'em ups, this is an easy one to recommend. Alright, so that'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for coming out and joining me this week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.